Hello everyone, I'm Randall Mendenhall alongside Glenn Seeger on location at the Range Systems Studio. Glenn works with many of our law enforcement, military, and international customers and is among the longest tenured employee at Range Systems. Glenn's topic today is top 5 problems and solutions with rubber bullet traps. Glenn, thank you for joining today.
Thank you.
All right, so the purpose of today's webinar is really just to provide a clear understanding of the common problems and their solutions with rubber bullet traps. In particular, we're going to speak on both granular rubber traps and block rubber traps. Are they perfect? No, all bullet traps have some sort of limitations. But in full disclosure, these problems that we're going to speak of are very rare and often completely avoidable. By the way, Glenn, what can you tell us about, or what can you tell the audience about our experience doing this?
Okay, well, Range Systems has been doing this for nearly 20 years. We've always been the rubber guys, and we're pretty passionate about rubber-based bullet traps. Today we have a block trap and a granular rubber trap, and we also have a steel bullet trap as well. So we have a full assortment of bullet traps. Our bullet traps, well, I've been involved with doing over 150 different installations of bullet traps in shoot houses. Products that we manufacture and have manufactured for all this time are used by elite militaries and LE agencies, commercial and home ranges all around the world.
All right, and I think another important characteristic of rubber is really to bring up the testing and certification process. What can you tell us about that?
Well, that's a great point, Randall. It's really a big deal. It's just important that you recognize as a range operator, you want to believe in the product that you're buying. You want to know that it's not just Glenn or Randall saying it works, but independent test agencies that confirm that it works, and decades of real world performance.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And also I think it's important to note that for the purposes of today's webinar, we're really only talking about Range Systems rubber bullet traps. And I say that because there are a host of other manufacturers out there with varying price points and quality, but essentially it comes down to some are using different rubbers. And so you can see here in the image of a different type of rubber that was used for a block trap. It actually looks very similar to the Range Systems rubber used in this portable block trap, but you can see how it's just crumbling there, and in fact they had to use Range Systems block trap, portable block trap, to function as the primary bullet trap because it was Imposter rubber there. And there's another picture there. So again, we're only speaking about Range Systems products for the purposes of today's webinar, and I think that is important to note. Well, let's get started on the content here, Glenn. Talk about problem number 1. Rubber bullet traps start on fire. What can you tell me about that?
Well, Randall, that's probably one of the biggest comments that you hear, or myths or whatnot. Yes, rubber bullet traps burn. Literally everything burns. But the reality is the fires are very rare on ranges. I mean, in all the time that I've been doing this, I've seen 3 or 4 fires that occurred in a range, and literally all of those were either identified immediately or shortly thereafter as a maintenance issue combined predominantly with a tracer issue. Just to be clear on it, a tracer issue is an incendiary round that has a flame that comes out of the back of it, used by the military to identify the direction of a bullet at night. You're shooting in the dark, it's hard to tell where it's going, and the tracers allow you to see a long line of red light going towards its target. So anyways, obviously a projectile that has that coming out of it is not the best thing to throw into any rubber trap or in any indoor range. It's just a hazardous product and doesn't belong. But to that point, fires are very rare in a range, and You just want to make sure that you're not allowing that into your range. Again, it's more of a military kind of thing. But because of the internet, sometimes people can get a hold of these things. And you just want to be upfront with your customers and make sure they're not using those, and you shouldn't have issues. The other one is regular maintenance. You need to have a clean trap. Keep that thing clean, do the maintenance, keep the floor clean, all of those kinds of deals. Just common sense, and you'll never have a problem.
Yeah, I think that regular maintenance point is very important there. All right, next problem. Problem number 2, rounds going through rubber bullet traps. What's the reality of that, Glenn?
So, the key thing is, since you're stopping the bullet with granulate depth, you need to make sure that your granulate depth is appropriate. And so in the instances I mentioned where they had a bullet go through the trap, I mean, literally, you could see shiny metal. You could see the back structure of the trap. And obviously, that's not the kind of solution you need to have.
Let's move on to problem number 3 then. Rubber bullet traps require too much maintenance. What's the reality of that, Glenn?
Well, all traps require maintenance. Again, so we sell several rubber-based bullet traps. We also sell a steel trap. All of the traps require maintenance. A lot of people do a granular trap because of the cleanliness part of it, right? Because you're encapsulating rounds that are generally whole. On our steel traps, they tend to get pulverized a bit more because you're hitting steel, and it's being redirected into a deceleration chamber, and then ultimately collected in a bucket. But at the end of your day of shooting, and you walk up to the granite trap, put your hand in there, shuffle it around a little bit, and pull out some projectiles, you're going to have whole projectiles. Walk around to the back of the steel trap, grab a bucket, pull it out, take a look, you're mostly going to have frags in there. And so that's the fundamental, the initial thing that people make a decision on which trap to go is. I'm looking at a cleanliness issue or whatnot.
Oh, that's a valid point. And again, the importance of maintenance, regardless of the type of bullet trap that you have, it's important to make sure that that trap is maintained. Okay, let's switch to problem number 4 then. In terms of rubber bullet traps, we sometimes hear about a problem with bounce backs and bounce outs. What's the reality and the solution for that, Glenn?
Well, I'll say that just to start with, any and all bullet traps can have this problem happen. And again, it's not a real great concern. In the ranges, anytime you go to a commercial range or LE range or whatever, and you walk, obviously when the line of fire is not live, you walk down, you take a look at the floor of the range, you tend to find a little bit of projectile on the ground. And again, it can happen to any kind of bullet trap because oftentimes the thing that causes it to occur is the shooter is not hitting the trap. Right, they're hitting the floor, they're hitting the sidewall, they're hitting the target carrier, they're hitting the baffle. There's a multitude of things they can hit, and then there's the multitude of reasons.
So that's what we're looking at here, right? Where they hit the floor.
Yeah, you can see some lines on the floor. They're hitting some things on the floor, and
there's
so
the bullet trap.
If you hit the floor of the range before you hit the trap, sometimes you're going to slow the velocity of the projectile down so far that when it hits the trap, whether it's steel or rubber, it might not stay in the trap.
All right, problem number 5 then, lead disposal. What can you tell us about that, Glenn? What's the reality of it?
Well, the fact is, again, all types of bullet traps, you have to dispose of the lead. It's just a function of doing business in this line of work, right? The picture you see here is a professional cleaning a granular rubber trap. So, I mean, just like the steel trap, right, you need to do the maintenance on it. You need to extract that lead and dispose of it. In a granular trap, the procedure is generally you'll have a professional come in and maybe they do it at night, maybe they do it on a weekend or whatever day you're slow, and a few guys pull the rubber out onto the floor from the bullet trap. Then they run a machine kind of like you see that he's got there, and the machine is kind of a neat little vacuum system that vacuums the granular rubber up on one side. Then on the other side, it has an exhaust that propels the rubber granulate that it's picked up back into the bullet trap. So one side sucks up the rubber, the other side fires it back into the bullet trap. And because the lead is heavier than the granulate, the projectiles remain on the ground. So you'll see all the lead bullets on the ground by his feet. So after he cleans out all the rubber, puts it back in the trap, he'll be left with that the bullets on the ground, and he'll collect those, and those are then recycled.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I hope that our audience understands that we're emphasizing it heavily. Just that all bullet traps require maintenance, and it's just important to keep that important component of your range maintained.
Sure.
So, Glenn, thanks for presenting with me today, and thank you to everybody who joined.
Yes, thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time and interest, and anything we can do to help you guys, please reach out to us. Enjoy your day.
All right, thank you, everyone.